So we're going to have part 2 of VAE now, and it's going to be some case scenarios to run through, which you should have in your handout that was, available for you. You will have the intro, the scenario, setting it up, and then you'll have a table to start with for 2 cases. There will be a lot more. We're going to build on that, but that's really what you're looking for. So the first scenario is a 59-year-old male who's seen in the ER on 1/27. He has an admitted diagnosis of influenza, and there's a suspicion of a complication related to a bacterial pneumonia. He's placed on the ventilator in the ER, and he's admitted to an inpatient location that same day. In-plan DAE surveillance is being performed in that location where he was admitted to, the bedded location. The patient subsequently declines and is eventually transferred to another facility on the evening of 2/4, a facility that provides support with ECMO. So he's eventually put on ECMO. Review his ventilator settings and additional information provided in the table and determine if a VAE is identified prior to his transfer to the other facility on 2/4. So this is the table that you all should have. So I'll leave this up here a while and then I'll flip to the next slide so that you can see your options. But, just get started trying to determine if you think there's a VAE detected based on this information provided. And so your choices are going to be, no, there was no event identified. The patient had pneumonia, present on admission, and was placed on ECMO eventually, so therefore is excluded from surveillance. B, VAC with a date of event 1/30. PVAP, date of event 2/2, or VAC, date of event 2/3. Now, do you need me to flip back to that table? Okay. And we will be using Poll Everywhere, so just get your phones and selections ready. I think you can already send it through, even though I'm not resting on that slide. All right, are you ready? You want a little bit more time. All right, the answer is C. The majority of you who answered did get that correct. That's a good sign. It's PVAP, date of event 2/2. Now let's take a look at that. So on 1/31 and 2/1, we have a baseline period established in the PEEP parameter, and that's immediately followed by increase in PEEP of greater than or equal to 3, and that is sustained for at least 2 days, in this case 3 days. So they met VAC in the PEEP parameter on 2/2. Date of onset of worsening oxygenation on 2/2 is the date of event. Now, why? Let's take a look in that FiO2 parameter. There was a baseline period, or there has to be a baseline period established immediately preceding the evidence of worsening oxygenation. And so we don't have an event on 1:30 because you see that on the 28th it was 40, and then it was 50, and then it was 80. I mean, while there was a jump of greater than 20 prior to 1:30, there was no baseline established. And then on 2/3, again in the FiO2 parameter, VAC definition is met. It's not that it isn't met, it's just that that date of event is within the 14-day event period, so you don't report a repeat VAE. Okay, and it's a PVAP because we have temps that are eligible, and we apparently must have met the 4 greater than or equal to 4 qualifying antimicrobials, and we have some laboratory information that we use to do that. So tell me what criterion of the PVAP tier was met. Criterion 1, criterion 2, criterion 3, I don't know, I guessed it was PVAP. So 1, 2, or 3? No. Okay, maybe you guessed, but now tell me now that you know, which criterion is it? I want that 64 to start shrinking down. Okay, there we go. Good. I'm not moving off of this slide until there's a 0 on D. If you want to go home or back to your hotel, I guess I should say. Okay, we'll blame that 17% on the web streaming audience. The answer is criterion 1. All right. So let's walk through this a little bit. You have to meet VAC to go to IVAC. And I would like to just spend a little time on how you met the IVAC definition in this particular example. You had eligible temps, and then you also have to have the new antimicrobial agent present for greater than or equal to 4 days. And I'm going to use the calculator here to show you the importance of why you want to select those, if the administration is taking place outside of the window, why you want to check those boxes. That's the calculator's ability behind the scenes codings to determine if you have a new antimicrobial agent. So when you're entering your administration of antimicrobial agents to see if you're going to proceed to the IVAC tier, it is important, just as important, to enter administration on those 2 days outside, those 2 days prior to the window, as it is to enter administration in the window. So in this case, you can see that ceftriaxone does not contribute any QADs. That's not how we're proceeding to the IVAC tier. All right. So the way we are bumping up to the IVAC tier from VAC is because of the administration of the azithromycin. And note that there's a gap on 2.1. and for whatever reason there was a missed dose of azithromycin. But when it's the same agent, the days between administration count, and this is, as Tara covered, the attempt to address renal dosing, so that if you have a patient that's getting antimicrobial agents every other day, that we're able to capture those and not miss meeting the QAD. So we met the IVAC, we get to the PVAP, and we are eligible for the criterion 1. We had an BAL, or was it an endotracheal? Let me see, what was it? No, I don't remember. We had a specimen, okay? We're going to find out in a couple slides later here, that met the quantitative amount. It was not reported as a colony in quantitatively, but if you're not able to have your laboratory report that way, or they choose not to, and they're also not able to give you the equivalents in their semi-quantitative means of reporting, then you can use our FAQ number 24, and if you have anything that's moderate, heavy, many, 2+, 3+, 4+, those semi-quantitative means of reporting are eligible for meeting the PVAP criterion 1. Okay. So the calculator does tell us that we have that. And it wasn't endotracheal aspirate, it wasn't a BAL. Sorry, jumped ahead to the next one. We actually do meet criterion 2 as well. There's the purulent respiratory secretions is met, and you have an eligible specimen, the endotrach, but you want to always select the criterion in which is, the highest level that you can meet when you're entering that. So had you answered criterion 2, you weren't wrong. It's just that the best answer was criterion 1. And do note that strep pneumoniae was identified on admission, on admission on 127 with this patient. But just because an organism is identified outside of the VAE window period, you don't exclude that. So if you have a culture result that is available within the VAE window period, and it's the right quantity, and it's an eligible specimen and eligible organism, you are to use that to see if you can meet PVAP. The thought process behind that is, if a patient is admitted, they can very easily be colonized with an organism if a sputum or a specimen is collected, and then later, after being ventilated or after being hospitalized, that colonization then leads to infection. So we don't want to miss identifying a PVAP if that scenario should happen. So to recap, this patient is not excluded from VAE surveillance because he was admitted with pneumonia. And he's not excluded from surveillance because at some point he's going to be placed on ECMO. So he is eligible for surveillance while he's on a ventilator on a mode that's conventional or isn't eligible for use. Pathogens identified outside of the window still are used if they're identified in the window. It's important to consider all of those agents that are antimicrobial agents that are administered outside of the window those 2 days when you're using that, because that contributes to meeting the new antimicrobial agent definition. Days between the same antibiotic do contribute to the qualifying antimicrobial days, and we do have the FAQ to help you for your laboratory if your laboratory doesn't report using quantitative results. Okay, so what if there wasn't an event on 2-2? So I just changed everything to 5s, guy's stable in the PEEP parameter. And you did have knowledge that the azithromycin was actually ordered and was going to be continued once he was transferred to the other facility, and he should have been probably going to get another dose on 2.5, 2.6, 2.7. So you had that information. And what event do you think would have been reported then? And so we would be then meeting that, you'd be able to use that meeting in the FiO2, that VAC definition, where it was 60 and then 80. So I'm getting at the issue of the antimicrobial agent again. So it would have been a VAC, IVAC, PVAP, or are you totally lost with this scenario I'm presenting? So what do you think? Somebody's lost. We're going to find you. What's the saying? All who wander are not lost. Your mind's just wandering because it's late in the day. Okay, and so the answer is VAC. Whoops. The answer is VAC, and the reason is that now, if you were entering this into the calculator, or if you were trying to determine if that azithromycin was going to contribute to the QADs, the enough days, you'll see that you only, first of all, it's not new, because now when your VAE window is set, azithromycin was administered outside of the VA window period, so it's no longer a new antimicrobial agent. Even though there's that 1 day gap, the new definition was the antibiotic administered, it can't be administered at least 2 days before. So it's not new. And even if it were new, let's say that it wasn't administered on 131, and you have that information that, oh, well, they prescribed it for 10 days, so can I use that? And we get this question fairly frequently. The patient was discharged or the patient died, and I know that they were going to get the antimicrobial agent because it was ordered. So can I use that to meet the IVAC definition? And the answer is no. You're going on administration, not on orders, or what you think maybe was going to happen. Or he missed the dose, but he was supposed to get it. Oh, nope. It's only what you can find documented. So azithromycin or ceftriaxone in this example are not new, and then the patient was DC'd, so you're done tracking him. There's no QADs, and so this event would just stay at the back level. Okay, the second case. A 17-year-old male is admitted to the adult medical ICU on 1/1 after suffering a cardiac arrest while participating in a polar plunge event. Silly 17-year-old. He was initially ventilated on 1/1 in the ER, and he had a central line placed on arrival to the ICU. He was improving and extubated on 1/3, but later that same day, his respiratory secretions increased in quantity, and an expectorated sputum was sent for culture. He became hypoxic and required reintubation on 1/4. His chest imaging on 1/4 demonstrated a new infiltrate in the right lower lobe. And again, that was found on 1/5 and 1/7 on imaging. A bronchoscopy was performed on 1/5. In-plane CLABSI and VAE surveillance had been selected in this location in their monthly reporting plan. Is a VAE identified? And of course, the selections are going to be VAC, IVAC, PVAP, or no VAE. And I'll flip back to the table for you. Okay, let's see how the results are coming in. Back. Whoa. Okay. I still see some decision making going on back there. Give you a little bit more time. Okay. And the answer is A. A VAC is identified. Very good. Most of you selected that. So let's take a look at this. In the PEEP parameter on January 3rd and 4th, there's a baseline period established, and then that's immediately followed by an increase to 8. And actually, the same occurs in the FiO2 parameter. It also meets, this is one of those times when it's met in both parameters. This can happen, but remember, this is not what has to happen to meet the VAC definition. So you don't have to meet VAC in both parameters. It's one or the other. Can be both, but it doesn't have to be. This patient was extubated on the 3rd and then re-intubated on the 4th. But note that there wasn't a full calendar day break when he was off of the ventilator. So it's the same episode of mechanical ventilation. You don't have to start over to establish a new baseline period. The good way to think about that, and the question that the lady had about ECMO, does she start the next day when he comes off of ECMO? As soon as there are ventilator settings available in the medical record on the calendar day, you have the ability to select a daily minimum value. So think of it in those terms as to why you wouldn't be able to begin or why you would have to end surveillance on a patient. In this case, he was extubated on the 3rd, so at some point during the 3rd, he had some values, and he was re-intubated on the 4th, so at some point during the 4th, there were some documented ventilator settings. So for both of those days, you would be able to select the daily minimum value. Therefore, it's all the same mechanical ventilation episode. Now, if he hadn't if there had been a full calendar break, there would not have been a VAC detected on the 5th. So there would have eventually been one, but he would not have had a VAE. Okay, because there would have been a full day break. Okay, but back to the real scenario. So he did meet the VAE definition. VAC was detected on the 5th. There were some eligible temps and actually an eligible white count in the VAE window period. But what's the problem here? Why can't we proceed on to the next here? The antimicrobial agents are not new. So while he has some eligible laboratory data that would lead you to believe, oh, this is going to be a PVAP, doesn't happen. If you can't meet IVAC, you can't go to PVAP. So this would be reported as a VAC in this location because they're doing in-plan VAE surveillance. Again, just pointing out the importance of these 2 days. If you had antimicrobial administration on those 2 days outside of the VAE window, make sure you're using those because that's going to impact whether or not you have a new antimicrobial agent that can contribute to accruing the greater than or equal to 4 QADs. So in this case, we just have a VAC, and that's fine. A VAC is a VAC. VAC is a VAE, and IVAC is a VAE, a PVAP is a VAE. The level or the tier in which is met does not make it any more significant. We do have a blood culture, though, and you're going, oh, darn. I can't call this secondary to the VAE. So now what do I have? A CLABSI? What's going on? So what do you think? Do you have a CLABSI? Do you have a BSI that's secondary to VAE? Do you have a BSI that's secondary to pneumonia? Or are you just going to send this to us and ask us what you should report? So now you're going to want to probably go back to your initial scenario there, because there might have been some info there that you might want to see if you can use. Hint, hint. And you can also look at the table again, because there might be some little pearls or little ditties there that you're going to be able to use. So your options are that you have a CLABSI, you have a BSI secondary to VAE, a BSI secondary to pneumonia. See how things are coming in here. 50-50. Oh yeah, now you see that somebody on there. It's funny how that goes away as soon as you show the results. At least those people that answered D are honest, okay? That's all right. We appreciate honesty. All right. So the answer is there is no CLABSI. It's a BSI, and it can be attributed as secondary to pneumonia. And that was what the majority of you answered. Let's take a look at that. Remember that we can't have the BSI secondary to VAE because that's only able to be attributed to VAE if you meet the PVAP level and of the algorithm, and we were stopped at the VAC tier. And when you're doing VAE surveillance, if you can't attribute the BSI to VAE, you can look to all the other definitions, and that includes pneumonia. So you do want to see if you can do that. And in this case, you can. Again, reminding you that pneumonia can be met using either scenario 1 or scenario 2 of the secondary BSI appendix. So if we take a look at the intro part here, we are going to determine which was met. So if you got this right and you know that it was a secondary BSI to pneumonia, did you meet scenario 1 or scenario 2? Okay, the correct answer is scenario 1. Most of you had selected that. So let's look at how that was accomplished. In the little intro part, he had an increase in respiratory secretions on 1-3. He was hypoxic. He required reintubation, so that's worsening of oxygenation, increased oxygen demand. He had the eligible chest imaging results. Looking at the table, he had eligible temps and an eligible white count. He had a BAL and he had a sputum, but what's wrong with that sputum? It was, we'll get to that. I'm going to set the IWP now on this table. Don't be confused. We're leaving VAE. Now we're going to have an IWP. We use the infiltrate, which is the diagnostic test, to set the IWP. So we have the 3 days before and the 3 days after. Within that IWP, we have the temp requirement, a white count requirement. We have the imaging. We have 2 of the signs or symptoms, and we have a culture result. But we can't use that sputum because why? I'm looking for one word. Pardon? Contaminated. It was an expectorated sputum, so it was not collected from, it was collected after he was extubated, so we can't use that. But fortunately, they did a BAL, and therefore we meet, if you look at the NEW2 algorithm, you can see that we more than meet the signs and symptoms. We have fever and white count. We only need 1. We have an eligible specimen. Just a little demonstration of the worksheet generator. If you put this information all in, again, that chest x-ray on the 4th is setting the window, the green representing the window, the checked box as the first, the gray box as the diagnostic test. And your date of event is 1-3. Unfortunately, it is HAI. And your blood is then collected in the secondary BSI attribution period of the pneumonia 2, and it has a pathogen that matches the site-specific specimen, the BAL, that allows you to meet scenario 1 of the BSI secondary attribution period. Okay. Want to draw attention to the fact how many people use this worksheet generator? Yeah, a fair number. Okay. Good. Kathy mentioned first day that, garbage in, garbage out, like most tools. If you don't check these boxes, you're not going to get the right determination. So the coding behind this is determined by these boxes. So just free texting in your information isn't going to render you the correct determination. So make sure you check the boxes. Excuse me. Sorry. So to recap, this was a 17-year-old. He was in an adult location. That's okay. VAE is not age-based. It's location-based. So he's included in the VAE surveillance. We talked about how there was not a new episode of mechanical ventilation because there was not a full calendar day break when he was off of the ventilator. You can meet VAC in both parameters, but it's not required. You must meet VAC to proceed to IVAC, and you have to meet IVAC to proceed to PVAP. So just a reminder, don't waste your time collecting a lot of data on the patient or spending time going through the chart looking for labs and white counts and temps if you haven't met the VAC. Conserve your energy. The BSI can only be secondary to VAE if you proceed to the PVAP tier, but remember that you do have the ability when you're doing CLABSI surveillance to look at pneumonia, regardless of whether you're doing VAE or not doing VAE. You always can use pneumonia just like you use UTI and SSI and all the other Chapter 17 definitions. And that's it. And you're on the down slide of Mike, it's hump day. Any questions?